the more that you understand writing, the more that you understand how a movie or a TV show or even like a little internet video is structured, the stronger of a performer you will become.
Nick, thank you so much for joining us. First question is you voice a very wide range of characters on Big Mouth. How do you manage to find a way to develop distinct characters and personalities for each one?
Personalities and characters, I credit our incredible writing staff and producing team who, obviously I am one of, but really have over time built such a incredibly specific group of characters that some of whom I voice, some of whom I don't, but that are just so clear so that when the actors get their hands on them, it's pretty clear exactly who they are and how they're distinct from the other characters. As far as my voices go, many of the voices were established in the first couple seasons. And then I get thrown different voices each episode. It's like, can you do this? I don't even know. I mean, they're all frankly a blur. So usually it's a combination of an accent, a region, or something like that, plus then a vocal quality, high pitched, gravelly, deep voiced, and maybe there's a speech impediment somewhere in there. So it's usually a combination of three or four elements that then come together for a voice.
I know you're speaking at the developmental level. Now I have to know at a logistical level. You said that it's a bit of a blur. What is it like when you are doing a scene and you are multiple or several characters within that same scene?
I've always enjoy when I'm playing multiple characters in a scene. I've basically been doing that since season one. And early on in the show, when we were all this is before COVID, we were oftentimes recording all together. I would just spend the entire day in the booth and voice my characters, but also voice other characters so that whoever was acting in the booth would have someone to improvise with. Because we always found stuff that way. And then in season eight, we kind of came back to that a bit. So I recorded a bunch of my episodes with John, or if I had a lot of stuff with Jason Mantzoukas, or specific episodes where I could record with Maya Rudolph, like we were able to be in the booth together. And that always adds another level to it. When I'm playing with my, I guess perfect for Big Mouth. When I'm playing with myself, I I enjoy it. I one can I just know what the I know what the other actors are going to be doing. Um, and I also can improvise and improvise in a specific way where I know where I want the joke to go because I'm voicing both characters. And I can also find a pace and rhythm. Um, I mean, it's not always the case that what I recorded in one scene where I'm playing two, three, or four of the characters. It's not like they all end up in the final cut, but it does help in sort of the pacing and tone of a scene that I can do that all myself versus kind of reading with Mark Levin or Jennifer Flackett, who are oftentimes directing the scenes off camera. They're great, but there's something about one, it's not over Zoom, and two, I can sort of steer certain takes in certain ways because I'm playing multiple characters.
Is that common for to be in the booth with other voice actor performers? Because I guess my frame of reference was that usually wasn't the case. Is it more of like an improv type of setup when you're playing off one another like that?
I mean, it's all show specific and schedule specific. So I know like Bob's Burgers, for example, started where they were all oftentimes in the booth together. The first animated show I did was called Life and Times of Tim, and we were all in the booth together. It was at a time in my life and career where I had a lot more time on my hands, so I could stay for a long portion of the day. We have probably one of the busiest group of actor, performer, writers in the business. So it's not like you have unending amounts of time with Maya Rudolph or John Mulaney, or Natasha Lyonne or Ali Wong or Jordan Peele. Luckily, everyone I've mentioned is a stone cold genius, and doesn't require that many takes to get it. But when left to our own devices, there is an element that comes when you have multiple people in the booth, able to not just improvise, but frankly, just feed off of one another's energy. Like you're, if I'm in the booth with Maya Rudolph, I'm trying to make Maya laugh. So it's going to make me push a little harder to find something new or specific or surprising. And I think in season 8 we definitely return to that, and luckily our actors like Maya and John and Jason specifically, who I was in the booth with a bunch, made the time and made the scheduling such that we could be in there together, because there is something additive to it. And if you listen to the first couple seasons of the show, we were in the booth more together pre-COVID, and there is a certain essential quality to it that pops up.
One thing that we get a lot from the audience is what's something you wish that you understood earlier in your career, um, about sustaining a career, be it in comedy or acting or voice acting?
Starting to write as early as possible. There's just no equivalency, but getting acting jobs is so hard. And proving to people that you can do things is so hard, that the earlier that you realize that writing for yourself, collaborating with friends, or yeah, collaborating with friends, even if you're yourself, that you're not a writer per se, but you have friends who want to write or write for you or write with you, that it just opens up so many avenues that are, I think at this point, mandatory for you to be able to act. And I think the more that you understand writing, the more that you understand how a movie or a TV show or even like a little internet video is structured, the stronger of a performer you will become. And I did it early, but I wish I had started even earlier writing more long form stuff.
I wonder from the sort of like mental and motivational aspect, the times as an actor where
Mhm.
you're not feeling in demand or you're not getting necessarily the opportunities that you are hoping to. What have you found to be the kind of most effective way to deal with those stretches, that kind of feel inevitable for every performer's career?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it kind of off what you're saying and what I was saying is, not only when you start to write and produce and collaborate on your own stuff, not only does it provide a platform for you to show what you can do, but also it, for lack of a better term, fills the day. Like it gives you action, it gives you activity, so that when you're not getting the casting, or you're not getting the call back, or you're just waiting. So much of what's, I think, so hard about acting is just the powerlessness that one feels just waiting to be chosen. And so by writing, producing, and beyond, you are giving yourself, you're staying warm, you're keeping your instrument warm. And it's different than class. It's different than being in a class or a workshop, which is great. But I just think it's so important to keep the instrument warm and active, and to keep your true self, your creative self fulfilled. And also it just provides opportunities. It just is, it's just like, I can't tell you now as a producer how often I'm going to Instagram or TikTok, um, and watching and discovering people who have made their own content, which one tells me they're self starters and also showcases what they can do, and it's incredibly, it's a very helpful selling mechanism for an actor.
Similar in that vein of creating opportunity, as you mentioned, you have everything from main characters in an episode to characters so small that you're like, gosh, I can't even remember all the characters that I've played on this. For those kind of smaller roles where an actor is getting those opportunities, what advice do you have about making the most of that opportunity, making a role making the most out of that and making a role memorable.
It's because I've been on both sides of it, and it's challenging. When you're starting in a basketball game, you get time to warm up, you get a feel for the game. If you're on the bench and you get called in, you have to be warm and ready to go and enter the game as if you've been in the flow the whole time. It's a really challenging thing, and I think the same goes for actors. So you get cast on a show or a movie, and you have a few lines, and you've got all these other people who are on day 27 of this thing that they've been working on, and they're warm, and their lines have come easy. They're not stopping and starting, and so sometimes it's challenging for those guest stars to come in, or someone coming in for a few lines. I think most importantly is be prepared, because there's nothing worse than waiting for someone who's there just for a brief thing and waiting for them to get it right. So you want to come in as prepared as possible, but also figure out a way to leave yourself room to be flexible, because maybe you've come prepared with like an idea of what this thing is, but you don't know the scope of what's happened in that episode or in this movie, and you're like, oh, the director might be like, oh, your take on this is a little too close to something we did 3 days ago, so I need you to pivot this. Or our lead has to go do press in during lunch, so we're shooting their coverage, and then you're shooting with a stand-in or something. Like, so you just have to be flexible and able to deliver, and I think preparation is a huge part of that, but then also getting a read for how that show is working on that day, and adapt to the culture of that particular day on that particular set.
Curious, do you feel that there's anything different that you would give advice-wise for approaching a voice acting performance versus a, traditional on set? Or is it all essentially the same approach?
The beauty of voice acting is you don't have to be off book. You can give three wildly different takes on a line. Like usually the way we record is we run the whole scene so everyone can get a feel for the whole scene a few times, and then we go in and really go line by line, and try to provide a few different options. And that is something where I really think you want to prepare and have a take on. And I would say this is for both voice acting and um, for film and television, or now new media, internet as well. Is you want to have a very clear take on it, and then you have to be able to and be willing to be flexible about, like, no, we want it angry, or now we want you to have a different rhythm to how you're saying that line. And you just need to be adaptable, and you need to be flexible, and trust that the team you're working with knows what the greater vision is. And sometimes it means being like, oh, they're asking me to do this thing and I didn't prep it this way. But you just have to be willing to be flexible, and be like, oh, okay, that's a great, or let me take that note. And I would say that it's much easier to do that in voice, because voice acting, you're doing, multiple takes, and it's just, you're just recording. There's no worry about losing light or losing a location or anything like that. But on set, you don't have as much leeway and flexibility in time.
And trying to find a way to ask this question that isn't a version of like every writer's least favorite question of where do you get your ideas?
Uh,
But you're coming at it again, like I said, from so many different approaches. Where do you find yourself finding creative inspiration throughout the process?
well, I guess in speaking to both Big Mouth and adults, Big Mouth, originally loosely based on my own experience going through puberty, but by season 8, actually still referencing things that happened in my life. Like in season 8 of Big Mouth, my character Nick finally grows, which is what happened to me finally in high school. And it felt like, oh, this is a great time to sort of explore this part of puberty, my puberty, that we had not yet explored. So that became something that we were able to really directly explore it in an episode, and the good and the bad that comes with finally, hitting puberty, getting your growth spurt, and what comes from that. And Adults, a show about 20 somethings living in New York. I'm obviously now much older than the people portrayed in the show, but similarly, just drawing on my experience of what it was like when I was in my early 20s in New York as a struggling actor, performer. What did my what were my apartment situations like? What did my bed smell like? Like what, all of those elements, drawing directly on it. Now, in that case, I wasn't writing episodes, but I was producing and really helping throughout the process, and really trying to reference my personal experience to help Ben and Rebecca express their personal experience and their friends' personal experience. Um, so oftentimes you're drawing on your own life, or this movie, I Don't Understand You, that I'm in with Andrew Rannells, about a gay couple trying to adopt a child and going on this like nightmare vacation to Italy. Um, I was able to draw on my own marriage and what what two partners are like and how they deal with crisis in different ways, and integrate that into integrate into my performance. As a writer and producer, I think the goal is, whether something happens to you or not, or you have a direct reference point or not, what you're trying to do is create something that feels relatable to everyone, whether they've experienced it personally or not. And I think, in particular, with Big Mouth and Adults, you're talking about people going through puberty, people graduating college or becoming in their early 20s and living in this case in New York, but really anywhere. And this feeling of like, I want to be a good person, but I'm not really good, and I'm not really a person. And just drawing on your own personal experiences to explore those themes is, I think, what makes things universal and hopefully relatable to work.
I have to know, because you voiced so many different characters, if you had to pick a favorite, who would it be?
I've been saying recently Lola, because I think she was a character who started as a personal favorite. People were a little maybe turned off by her at first, but have really come around on the internet, has really, I think, embraced Lola. So I have enjoyed her, but I really love them all. I mean, I think, interestingly, like Nick, the voice of Nick is most challenging, ironically, because it is my own, and it's harder to kind of have an easy, quick take on, in a way that you're like, oh, hormone monster. Okay, this is what he sounds like. Oh, an idiot basketball coach. Okay, I know that. Oh, a poor girl who's like been abandoned by her mother. Bam. When you're doing your own voice, it's sometimes can be more complicated.